All right, good afternoon, everybody. What's going on? This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. And on this beautiful day, I do the daily Black History at all time. Every single day, every time I get on here, make sure you hit that notification bell. Make sure you share this channel. All right. So today I'm gonna be dealing with the history about Mary Ann Shadd Cary, who was African American, later became a citizen of Canada, and she was also one of the first to be a publisher and a journalist, and she was an activist as well. So today we're going to commemorate her and speak on her life and her legacy and what she has done as far as publication is concerned and journalism is concerned. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and get started. All right, so right here, this is the picture of Miss Mary Ann Shadd. This is her. And also, right here, this is a statue of her. Okay, this is a statue of her as well. So now we're going to get into her life. Well, I'm going to get into her life and who she was and what she has done, the things that she has accomplished. Okay, so go ahead. Okay, there we go, right there. So now let's look at according to WikiOne. So here's the introduction. Mary Ann Shadd Cary. Okay, she was born on October the 9th of 1823 and she died on June the 5th of 1893. All right. So as you can see, this picture right here, this happened to be one of her old homes, or the house that she stayed in. All right. So anyways, all right, get back to it. She was an American, Canadian anti-slavery activist, journalist, publisher, teacher, and lawyer. She was the first Black woman publisher in North America and the first woman publisher in Canada. Shadd Cary edited the private cynical Freeman, established in 1853, published weekly in Southern Ontario, and it advocated equality, integration, and self-education for Black people in Canada and the United States. All right. Now let's look at her life story. So early life, Miss Mary Ann Shadd was born in Wilmington, Delaware on October the 9th, 1823, the eldest of 13 children to Abraham Dorez Shadd and Harriet Burton Parnell, who were free African Americans. Abraham D. Shadd, right, was a grandson of Hans Shadd, Alice John Shadd, a native of Hesse Castle, who had entered the United States serving as a Hessian soldier. So where is that located? Okay. Anyways, with the British Army during the French and Indian War, Ann Shadd was wounded and left in the care of two African American women, mother and daughter, both named Elizabeth Jackson. The Hessian soldier and the daughter were married in January of 1756, and their first son was born 6 months later. Okay. Now let's look down. A.D. Shadd was a son of Jeremiah Shadd, John's younger son, who was a Wilmington butcher. Abraham Shadd was trained as a shoemaker and had a shop in Wilmington and later in the nearby town of Westchester, Pennsylvania. In both places, he was active as a conductor on the Underground Railroad and in the other civil rights activities, being an active member of the American Anti-Slavery Society. And in 1833, named president of the National Convention for the Improvement of Free People of Color in Philadelphia. Growing up, her family's home frequently served as a refuge for fugitive slaves. However, when it when it became illegal to educate African American children in the state of Delaware, the Shadd family moved to Pennsylvania, where Mary attended a Quaker boarding school. In 1840, after being away at school, Mary Ann returned to East Chester and established a school for Black children. She also taught. She also later taught in Norristown, Pennsylvania, and New York City. 3 years later, after the passage of the Fugitive Act of 1850 AD, Shad moved his family to United Canada West, settling in North Burston, Ontario. In 1858, he became one of the first Black men to be elected to political office in Canada when he was elected to the position of councillor of Riley Township, Ontario. All right. So she comes from a family that has been involved in the activism, right? And so her family also moved to Canada so they could be able to get a better life for their children. And so being born in the United States and having to move to Canada. Now, here's the thing about this, what I noticed. From what people was telling me, those who are Canadian, that the racism in Canada is a little different from how we deal with racism here in America. It's very strange how racism operates in Canada. It's really complicated to explain, but I don't know. I don't think, how can I say this? I don't think it's as worse as American racism, but the racism is very it's pretty different up there. Yeah. So, but also during history, a lot of Blacks did not just only left the United States to go to European countries or the Caribbeans or whatnot, or even the continent. There were those who went to Canada, okay? Such as a place called Nova Scotia. So, yeah, Nova Scotia was the main location, main region where a lot of Blacks migrated to. And as you can see, Black people today in Canada, a lot of them come from a descendant of those who come from the Caribbeans, and those who left the Caribbeans and moved up there in the area. And then you have those, of course, who are descendant of African Americans that were enslaved here, but they have a high concentration of those who are of a Caribbean background in Canada as we speak of today. So, all right. So, let me go ahead and continue. Social activism. Now let's look at her social activism. In 1848, Frederick Douglass asked readers in his newspaper, The Northern Star, to offer their suggestion on what could be done to improve life for African Americans. Mary Ann Shadd, then only 25 years of age, wrote to him to say we should do more and talk less. She expressed her frustration with the many conventions that had been held to that date, such as those attended by her father, where speeches were made and resolutions passed about the evils of slavery and the need for justice for African Americans, yet little tangible improvement had resulted. Douglass published her letter in his newspaper or in his paper. Then go down and say, when the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 in the United States threatened to return free Northern Blacks and escaped slaves into bondage, Mary Ann Shadd and her brother Isaac Shadd moved to United Canadas and settled in Wisner, Ontario, which is not far from Detroit, across the border from Detroit. This is where Mary Ann's efforts to create free Black settlements in Canada first began. While in Wisner, she founded a racially integrated school with the support of the American Missionary Association. Public education in Ontario was not open to Black students at the time. Mary Ann offered daytime classes for children and youth and evening classes for adults. An advocate for immigration in 1853, Mary Ann Shadd published a pamphlet entitled A Plea for Immigration, or Notes of Canada West in its moral, social, and political aspects with suggestion respecting Mexico, West Indies, Vancouver's Island for the information of colored immigrants. The pamphlet discussed the benefits of immigration as well as the opportunities for blacks in the area. Okay. So now let's look down the Provincial Freeman. In 1853, Mary Ann Shadd founded an anti-slavery newspaper called the Provincial Freeman. The paper's slogan was devoted to anti-slavery, temperance, and general literature. It was published weekly, and the first issue was published in Toronto, Ontario on March 24th, 1853. It ran for 4 years before financial challenges forced the paper to fold. Mary Ann was aware that her name would affect the number of people reading it because of the gender expectation of the 19th century society. So she persuaded Samuel Ringard Ward, a black abolitionist who published several abolitionist newspapers, including Impartial Citizen, to help her publish it. She also enlisted the help of Reverend Alexander MacArthur, a white clergyman. Their names were featured on the masthead, but Mary Ann was involved in all aspects of the paper. So, in order for her to get her work published, she would have to go through the patriarch, the male, in order to do so, because back then it was not very recognizable for women to even get into doing a lot of journalism and publication. You know what I'm saying? They didn't really believe in that back in those time periods. So it was still under a major patriarchal system during that time. So she, in order for her to put out publications, put out articles or journals, she would have to go through the male to do so. And one happened to be an African American male or black abolitionist, and the other one happened to be a Caucasian. Yeah, that was the time period. All right. So let me go ahead and skip down a little bit, because yeah. Okay. Okay, it says, as was typical in the black press, the Provincial Freeman played an important role by giving voice to the opinions of black Canadian anti-slavery activists. The impact of African American newspaper from 1850 to 1860 was significant in the abolitionist movement. However, it was challenging to sustain publication. Publishers like Shad undertook their work because of a commitment to education and advocacy, and used their newspapers as a means to influence opinion. They had to overcome financial, political, and social challenges to keep their papers afloat. And it says black newspaper often modeled their newspaper on mainstream white publication. According to research conducted by William David Sloan in his various historical textbooks, the first newspaper were about 4 pages and had one blank page to provide a space for people to write their own information before passing it along to friends and family. He goes even farther to discuss how the newspapers during these early days were the center of information for society and culture. All right. In 1854, Mary Ann Shadd changed the masthead to feature her own name rather than MacArthur and Ward. She also hired her sister to help edit the paper. There was intense criticism of the change, and Mary Ann was forced to resign the following year. All right. And so then we're going to go down to the Civil War and post-Bellium activism. All right. So it says between 1855 and 1856, Shad traveled in the United States as an anti-slavery speaker, advocating for the full racial integration through education and self-reliance. In her speeches, she advised all blacks to insist on fair treatment and, if all else failed, to take legal action. She sought to participate in the 1855 Philadelphia Colored Convention, but women had never been permitted to attend, and the assembly had to debate whether to let her sit as a delegate. Her advocacy of immigration made her a controversial figure, and she was only admitted by a slim margin of 15 votes. According to Frederick Douglass' paper, although she gave a speech at the convention advocating for immigration, she was so well received that the delegates voted to give her 10 more minutes to speak. However, her presence at the convention was largely eluded from the minutes, likely because she was a woman. And it says, in 1856, she married Thomas F. Kerry, a Toronto barber who was also involved with the Provincial Freemen. She had a daughter named Sarah and a son named Linton. After her husband died in 1860, Shadd Cary and her children returned to the United States during the Civil War at the behest of the abolitionist Martin Delany. She served as a recruiting officer to enlist black volunteers for the Union Army in the state of Indiana. After the Civil War, she taught in black schools in Wilmington. She then returned to Washington, D.C. with her daughter and taught for 15 years in the public schools. She attended Howard University School of Law. She graduated at the age of 60 in 1883, becoming only the second black woman in the United States to earn a law degree. She wrote for the newspapers National Era, The People's Advocate, and in 1880 organized the Colored Women's Progressive Franchise. Shadd Cary joined the National Woman Suffrage Association, working alongside Susie B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton for women's suffrage, testifying before the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives, and becoming the first African American woman to vote in a national election. She died in Washington, D.C. on June the 5th at 1893 from stomach cancer. She was interred at Columbian Harmony Cemetery. All right, so it go down here, talk about her legacy. In the United States, Mary Ann Shadd Cary's former residence in the U Street corridor of Washington, D.C. was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1976. In 1987, she was designated a Women's History Month honoree by the National Women's History Project. In 1998, Mary Ann Shadd Cary was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. In Canada, she was designed a person of national historic significance with a plaque from the National Historic Site and Monuments Board placed in Chatham, Ontario. Their Ontario provincial plaques also honor her, and also in her newspaper, The Provincial Freeman. She is featured in Canada's Citizenship Test Study Guide released in 2009. In 2018, the New York Times published a belated obituary for her. Shad's 197th birthday was observed with a Google Doodle on October the 9th, 2020, appearing across Canada, the United States, Latvia, Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. Okay. And so there's many archives. And also, if you want to look at more information, you can see right here the references. There's a lot of sources you can find for yourself. And then you also look under further reading, and you can look at the external link as well. All right. All right, then. So also, I want to show you some more information to back up the article. All right, so if you guys can see that. Okay, so this says, who is she and what is she to you? Mary Ann Shadd Cary and the impossibility of Black/Canadian studies. Ronaldo Walcott. Okay. So as you can see, this is the abstract. That's the resume. All right. And then it goes on right here to talk about her life story, share some things. So this person's giving their account point of view on after what they have studied and researched on Mrs. Shad and how she has made an impact to them and whatnot. So basically, this is like, their own personal accounts based on information that has been studied. So, but it can be useful and it can help support and, back up the information that I read on WikiOne. Okay, so if you want to look this up, you can go ahead and do so. It's under journals.msvu.ca. Journals.msvu.ca. All right. So there's another article I want to present to you all before I go. Okay. All right. So this comes from the University of Nebraska Press. All right, it says, Find a Place, Mary Ann Shadd Cary and the Dilemmas of Black Migration to Canada, 1850 to 1870, written by the author Shirley J. Yee. The source is Frontiers, a Journal of Women's Studies, 1997, volume 18, number 3, pages 1 through 16. Okay, again, it was published by the University of Nebraska Press. So, right here, I'm going to read this first 3 lines, okay? Just so it can give an idea of what this article is about, okay? All right, so it says Mary Ann Shadd. Let me zoom that up a little bit. All right. Mary Ann Shadd, teacher, abolitionist, and promoter of Black immigration to Canada, left the United States in 1851 for the small farming village of Wisner, Ontario. She lived in Canada for 11 years, working as a teacher of fugitive slaves and as the primary editor of the Provincial Freeman, a Black Canadian newspaper. Although she was neither the first nor the last Black activist to support immigration, she was one of the most prolific and best-known Black female journalists of her generation, whose writings still exist. Shad wrote extensively in public and in private about her own experiences, as well as about conditions in the Black settlements, publishing one major essay on Black Canadian migration, A Plea for Immigration or Notes on Canada West in 1852. All right, and then go down. It says, for the most part, historians have recognized Shad's active participation in debates over Black immigration, the Underground Railroad, and the development of the Black Canadian press. Given that women until recently have tended to be excluded from research on Black nationalism and immigration, Shad's appearance in these studies reflects the strength of her presence among a predominantly male leadership. She challenged 19th century gender conventions by openly debating with Black male leaders about how best to build community and alleviate the poverty among Canadian Blacks. Through her constant attempts to insert herself into male world of political leadership, which either did not recognize or reject the idea of sexual equality, she identifies integration as both a gender and racialized notion. Canada, imbued with the image as a haven for Black, provided the context within which Shad could develop a broadly defined integrationist position. Thus, Shad's activism was as much about her effort to secure a place in the movement as it was about finding a new geographic location for transplanted Blacks. All right, and then down here, it says the purpose of this essay is to explore the ways in which this struggle within a struggle reveals certain contradiction and complication both in Shad's life as a young, educated Black female activist and in the immigration movement itself. Her activism on the behalf of Black immigration and the formation of Black Canadian identity illustrates two important points. First, how gender figures so prominently in immigration movement and the conceptualization of Black national identity. And second, how Canada emerges as a problematic site for the formation of identity and community during this period. Shad's work also reveals the importance of Black nationality as a concept in the narrative of Black women's history in the United States and Canada, at the same time that it demonstrates the importance of Black women work in the creation of Black community and national identity. Shad's experience as a Black activist in Canada and her views and strategies about how best to build Black community encourage historians to reflect further upon W.E.B. Du Bois' articulation later in the century of the existence of a double consciousness among Blacks as they struggle within a Western Eurocentric system of domination. In particular, the study of Shad's life and writing presents an opportunity to include national identity in addition to race, gender, class as a mean for understanding the multiple consciousness that shape Black women's experience in U.S. and Canada history. But as I argue in this essay, Shad was no nationalist, as at least insofar as Black nationalism was articulated during the mid-19th century. Rather, her integrationist Eurocentric views complicated the notion that Canadian immigration was a purely nationalist exodus. Shad, therefore, emerges as a complicated heroine who reminds us that activists are not undimensional individuals who lead linear or simple lives, nor are they unencumbered by the ideological currents of their generation. All right. Okay. Let me see something. Somebody put, fun fact, her brother Isaac Shad was the Speaker of Mississippi House of Representatives from 1871 to 1874. That's very interesting. Oh, that's real interesting. So yeah, someone just put that her brother Isaac Shad was the Speaker of Mississippi House of Representatives from 1871 to 1874. So, it runs in the family. So, her dad was a representative at one time where he was engaging into politics. So yeah, that runs in the family. But that's very interesting. I probably came across that information, but didn't get the time to actually read that. But I appreciate that you put that out there, Sanel. Thank you. I really do. All right. Anyways, so that's all for today. So you guys, please be safe and have a wonderful day. And also, all right. So yeah, please be safe and also take care of yourself. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share this video. If you like what you've seen, go ahead and share the video. Hit the notification bell. Also, not only hit the notification bell, But also, just make sure you subscribe. And if you're watching from Facebook, go ahead and share the video on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? You can share in your groups, you can share it on your page, whatever you gotta do. I really appreciate that a lot. I really do. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you that been doing so, and thank you for subscribing to the channel. Hopefully I can keep this thing going, and hopefully I can get more subscribers. But you gotta take baby steps. So it is what it is. I'm patient with that, and I'm not even tripping off of that. But other than that, you guys, y'all have a good day. All right. Until next time, I will connect with you all later. Peace. Thank you.